Pricking the bubble. We are back. Dr. Brant Raven has joined me, Mike the Llama, and we're also joined by Audio Pete.
Hello.
Dr. Raven, how are you?
Yeah, it's been a good week.
Yeah?
Yeah, not a bad week, actually.
Excellent.
Not a
Don't
bad
tell me
week.
a single thing about it. All right, so what I'd like to discuss today, we're going to get straight into it.
Right, this is a big jump. Go for it.
And I will ask, were you at all offended by what I just said to you then, where I said I was not interested in your week at all?
Was I offended?
Were you offended?
No, don't really care.
Okay. Oh, and why is that?
Because I think it takes a lot to offend me. Well, no, I shouldn't say that. It does.
Challenge accepted.
I suspect that I suspect you're leaning toward the idea that I'm constantly offended by things.
No. I guess it was more a lead into that's the topic today about being offended.
Oh, right.
And how one person's feeling of being offended seems to trump actual progress in a lot of times.
I think it's helpful to remind people.
Yes.
That when we come to do these podcasts, which we try and do weekly.
Yes. That's with two E's.
Yeah. I don't actually know what the topic is.
No, I like to surprise you because I think you're better in a spontaneous sense.
My spontaneous indignation of things
That's correct.
Is better served by not knowing the topic.
Yes, that is correct.
Right, that's what you're trying to say.
That is what I was trying to say.
Okay. So being offended, yes, people are offended by things all the time. Yes.
Yeah.
Go on. Keep going.
So my question is, how much attention should we give to that? How much consideration? Because I know you come from an academic background,
Yes.
and a logic-based background when it comes to opinions and facts
I like
and things.
to think so. Yeah, I like to think so.
So, being offended is largely emotional,
Yes.
and so what? As far as you're concerned, what credibility? That's not the word I'm looking for. What value do we give people's emotions and things as opposed to facts? Because, I understand.
Are you saying what value do we give, or what value should we give?
Well, no, yeah, probably should, I guess. There's a lot of things going on at the moment that in society or politics or things, and some of it comes down to people's feelings, how I feel about something. And whether I'm personally offended or not, is that important? Is it?
No.
Should it be? Well, should it be at least a consideration? I mean, if I walk up to you and fart in your face, you're going to say, "Oh, don't do that." That's just you being offended by it.
Well, that's not.
It's a terrible argument, and it's a hideous thing to do. But
am I offended by that? I don't
depends
know.
what I've eaten, I guess.
I'm not. I wouldn't say that would necessarily be offensive. I may describe it, and classically it has been described as being offensive. But is it offensive? It's certainly. It's not something I want.
It's undesirable.
It's undesirable. And I don't think you're necessarily doing it to offend me, even if you did it on purpose. If you did it on purpose, you're not doing it to offend me. You're doing it to be rude.
That's true.
Right, so being rude and being offensive are not the same thing. Right,
okay.
So we need to separate those two things out, right? Being offensive is...
We can move away from the bodily functions, if you like. And
the bodily functions does sort of lower the argument a little bit.
It does a little bit.
I mean, again,
I like to
let's
start
be
from
clear,
the bottom.
I don't want you to fart in my face. Let's be very clear about that, right?
Well, the evening's got some changed plans ahead then.
Right, okay.
I'll adjust the audio.
Right.
That's right.
I'm just saying, it's you doing that would be a very rude thing to do.
Yes.
But I don't know that it would necessarily be an offensive thing to do, even though I may describe it in written form or in verbal form. I may describe it as being offensive. because it has a connotation. It carries something with it when I say it's offensive, right? But I still don't understand what you're asking.
So, all right. So, a lot of laws and things and rules and how society behaves now has changed. Has changed in the last 5 or 10 years.
Right. I'm not allowed to offend people.
And that's effectively it. You are not allowed to offend people. Everyone and
right.
I understand that to a certain extent, but I also wonder how much weight should we be giving that? If it stands in itself in the way of progress or getting things achieved or you know.
So look, this is a very simple one. Okay, this is a really simple thing to say.
Okay.
First of all, the things that are factual cannot cause offence. We should be really clear on that. If I say something that is factual, that should not be causing someone to be offended.
But should not or does.
Yeah. So if you were to call me a bald git.
Yes. Well, hang on a sec.
Well,
okay.
no, hold on.
You're not that bald.
A baldish, git-ish. If you were to apart from the fact that you could say you're being rude, I might find that offensive because you know, oh, that makes me sad. I'm being reminded that I'm bald and a bit of a git. Do you not see that you know, that is, it may be a truth. You're bald. So I've had kids say, well, you're bald. They're being not deliberately offensive, but I may take offence that that's something that they say to me.
Yeah, whether you take offence or not is not particularly relevant, or it's not relevant to the argument of what I may have intended. I may to describe you as a git would be to draw a conclusion for which I may not have any evidence, right?
Just a feeling.
If I did have evidence to say that you were a git, then maybe describing you as a bald git is in fact a fair description. Because you are in fact bald, and if I had evidence that you were a git, then you would also be a git, right? So therefore that may be a very apt description, and the facts of the matter have don't care about your feelings. What you're really asking is, should I care about your feelings?
That's true.
Right.
That is true.
And it really depends. I don't know what the answer to the question is.
Well, there's going to be a fundamental difference if you know me and you're a friend.
Yeah.
You're probably going to treat me differently than if you looked across the way and saw someone who was in fact a bald git and said, "Hey, look at that bald git over there." They're not hearing the offence, so you could argue being a bit offensive in your description of the person.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But does that make it right? This is the old, if a tree falls in the forest and no one's there to hear it, is it still, did it still make a noise? So is your offensiveness still acceptable if no one's listening to it? Because and this is where I'm leading with this.
Should I, what you're...
let me tell you where I'm leading with this.
Go on.
So
on.
Where I'm leading with. Years ago, I made a comment and I said someone, I did a bit of a girly throw when I threw a ball, and it was like a delicate sort of throw, not a powerful thing. And I was called out for that because it was offensive. It was pushing the line that somehow... Thank you for our effects mic over there.
That was my stomach, by the way.
Pushing the line, or not pushing, but maintaining the line that somehow it was less of a throw. There was a negative context or connotation in the way that I presented.
But you
did a girly throw.
But you're presenting something which that's actually really interesting, because you were being offensive by doing that. You were being offensive by saying that, and I come to that decision from a position of fact. It is a fact that historically girls were put down because they as being weaker than boys. That is a fact.
Yep.
That is a historical fact.
Yep.
Were they in fact weaker? Well, I don't know. Maybe not all girls, certainly. Some girls were potentially weaker, some girls were not weaker than guys. But it is a historical fact to say that girls were generally considered weaker than men. And because of that history, you were unknowingly, unthinkingly borrowing that history to make a point.
Yep.
And that itself is offensive.
Yeah.
Yes, you were being offensive.
And I withdrew immediately.
Without intention.
No, that's right.
But
that's kind of what I was getting at. You said before about your intention, whether you're intending to be offensive or not. No, I wasn't intending to be offensive.
Right.
I was
but you were still being offensive.
But I was being offensive.
And a lot of people could argue, that you were your brain was indoctrinated by the culture in which you live.
I believe that's pretty much what was being said to me.
The fact that you're a male and that you were brought up in a certain way, and you're right, and those things you do have to think about, right?
Yep.
You do have to think about.
And let me just add, I've never said it since.
Yes.
I would never say it again. It was never anything other than the context of a story. It was never meant to be anything offensive.
Right. So let me butt in as I often do and give my own story. So I described to my little one. I have a friend who is Asian Chinese, and he has a daughter and who is also Chinese or has the Asian features. And so I described to the little one, his little one met my little one, and I just said to my daughter, "Oh, isn't it interesting that she looks different to what you look? Look at her eyes. She's got almond-shaped eyes." And he didn't hear me say that, but I said that to him, thinking it was very innocuous. I said that I had described to my girl his girl in that way, and he was offended by that. And I thought, well, why are you offended by that? Why is that an offence? Your daughter does look different to my daughter. I mean, and she has Asian eyes as opposed to European eyes. And I didn't feel that I was being offensive by saying that. I was simply stating a fact. And I wasn't using that fact in any way but to say, here's this wonderful person who looks different to what you do, and she's a wonderful person. She's a child. She's like you, but look at the difference, and look how you are so much the same. You look different, yet you're so much the same. You're still both kids.
When you explained this to the father, what was his?
He still found it offensive, and I didn't quite understand. Now, maybe in order for me to understand, I need to be in his shoes. I need to maybe have experienced the same level of racism he or his family may have experienced, and potentially still does experience. Maybe I still... But certainly, like you, I had no intention of being offensive to anyone. And to this day, I still do not believe I was being offensive. I think it's fair to describe an Asian person's eyes, and I'm using that as a feature only because it's one of the most noticeable features of any human that you look at, as being almond-shaped. There's nothing wrong with that.
I think offence may be in the eye of the receiver.
This is what was my conclusion. Yeah. My conclusion was maybe offence is in the eye of the beholder, and maybe if I can tune into that, I can choose to maybe say or not say something, depending on how controversial I want to be. But in a lot of cases, you can't tune into it. And in a lot of cases, I'm offending someone because I'm not adhering to something they believe in. And that is what I find unacceptable. That is the point at which I then have to tip the other way. If I'm saying something against a system of belief, right? I mean, let's be honest here. Let's be absolutely honest. If you look at the Islamic faith, and if you look at something like and a lot of Christian denominations, a woman is considered to be a lesser person than a man. It is freaking written in their holy book that is the case. I find that offensive, right? I find that offensive. Yet, if I were in some countries to speak out against that, I would be the aggressor, and I would be the one who's causing offence because I've spoken out against it.
I think maybe a good question to ask is, if you're offended, how much power do you have to redress it by controlling someone else's behaviour? Like, I'm offended by that, so you must stop doing that thing that offended me. How much power do we give to that? Because that's where the question is. If someone's beliefs or like your friend who took offence could have said, you must not ever say that sort of thing, and if you do, or there's laws against it, there probably are somewhere.
Maybe.
But you would have chosen to not do it, not reoffend without any of those laws. But
well, absolutely. I mean, if it came down to a situation where I was faced with him again, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't repeat that. But I wouldn't repeat that just to spite him.
Yeah, because you're now aware of it.
Yes.
So.
But how much should we change? How much are we compelled to change our behaviour because someone is offended?
Well,
that's kind of what.
Where you're
that's
going.
kind of where I'm going with this.
Well, I mean, in the current situation of the world, we're compelled quite dramatically to change our behaviour, and there have been many endless cases. Where, even in Australia, there was that there was a council where they
I talk about banning Christmas or
no. Well, that's the whole another story that could be told there.
Right.
But what about there was that council that basically some people from an Islamic background went to the council and they were serving ham sandwiches and they were offended by that.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, that's sort of a bit ridiculous, really. Let's be honest. There was the case in the UK where a person who was a checkout person who was of the Islamic faith refused to handle alcohol because of their faith, and they were offended by the handling of alcohol. Well, hang on a second. Fuck you. You took the job. This job required you to handle alcohol. How can you possibly be offended by that? I mean, I understand you don't want to handle alcohol. No one's forcing you to do that. But if you put yourself in a situation where you're going to be handling or doing something that you knew to begin with you would need to be doing, and that now offends you, I'm sorry, I can't agree with that or support you in that. Right?
I guess what you're saying is a little. I remember back in university we had sections of our department set aside for prayer, for Muslim students to prayer, to do their prayer, and that was fine. No one had a problem. But some people were offended that was set aside. Where's my room? Where's my... And that feels a little bit, just being a bit of a prick. But at the same time, it is another argument of, well, I personally find that offensive. It's the same sort of thing you said before. Well, I find that offensive that you require a room. It's taking up space. I can hear you doing whatever it is. There's always going to be something that offends someone.
Yeah,
and as Audio Pete said, at what point do we legislate against that? At what point do we just say, "Oh, bad luck"? I go back to my throw like a girl conversation. That was offensive. I stopped doing it, and it was possibly, and I'll say this as a white male, perhaps it was just me not understanding what women have had to go through. Maybe I'm in a position where I just don't understand that sort of stuff.
I don't think we have had. I don't think we do understand it. I'm saying that as a white male. I don't think we do understand it. But there's a lot of things I don't understand. There's a lot of things I freaking don't understand. I don't understand what Jewish people have to go through. I don't understand what Islamic people have to go through, what women have to go through, what people of colour have to go through.
But to a certain extent, you
do. But that not understanding those things doesn't disable me from looking at facts and making decisions around facts and making decisions around what's potentially offensive and what's not offensive. Okay, and there are things there are things that are designed to provoke, regardless of what offense.
That's what I was going to get.
Right, there are things that are designed to provoke. Now, a council who put out ham sandwiches was not trying to provoke anyone. Okay, that's it. A shop that requires you to handle alcohol when you applied for the job and decided to take that job, and now now you're offended because of your faith. That shop isn't requiring you to do that because they choose to be offensive, right?
But at the same time, are you being... are you deliberately being a bit of a pain in the bum by not saying, all right, well, I accept your differences. I accept that you feel this way. We'll just get someone else to do it. Isn't that a better approach rather than, well, you took the job, get stuffed?
Well, no, because it depends on the job that you took. It really
Well,
just
if, in
depends.
this instance, it's the one where occasionally you might have to handle a bottle of alcohol.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If you took that job, right? If you took that job, and I'm advertising that job,
I don't think you advertise the job saying, we'll occasionally handle alcohol. If you're a checkout person,
yes,
that's just what happens. Stuff comes through.
that's right.
Yeah, that's fine.
Right.
But I don't think you say a checkout person, but occasionally there'll be alcohol.
Yeah, but what are you supposed to do then? What is?
Well, that's what I just said. That's literally what I just
What am I
said.
supposed to do?
But then you can say, well, if there's alcohol, get someone else to do it. I know it's a pain in the bum, and it's about accommodating the differences in other people and embracing the differences, as long as they're not like, oh, I can't do this because I'm juggling at this time. That there would be ridiculous.
Well, why not? I mean, I'm taking my checkout job, but I don't like handling money. There you go. Now solve a fucking problem.
Well, because that's not based on anything.
Well, no, hang on. No, you're wrong. It's based on my belief in Zeus, who speaks to me personally and says that I should not handle money. Are you going to sit there and ridicule my religion now? Is that what you're going to do?
I think.
Hang on.
Hold on.
Don't give me that look. Are you ridiculing my religion?
I think if you were the only one,
What?
it could be very hard.
Argument for popularity. Okay, so just because I'm a religion of one, now you're ridiculing me. That's what you're doing. No.
I didn't
Oh, and
say.
by the way, did I tell you, my religion says I shouldn't pay tax. Sorry, government. Hang on, don't offend me. Don't make me pay tax. Don't offend me. Now, do you see where it goes?
I know. I understand completely.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm illustrating the point that you can take it to the nth degree, and there are things that you can take to the nth degree.
This
right?
feels like another slippery slope argument.
Well, it is. It is a very, very much a slippery.
But if you
slope.
have,
I mean, let's look very carefully, or very quickly at the Islamic faith.
Yep.
So I know a little bit about the Islamic faith, and I understand parts of it. One part of the Islamic faith, and I believe it to some extent it also applies to the Jewish faith, is that you should not lend money to be able to make a profit. I can lend you money, but I can't charge interest. Right? There's a whole plethora of laws around this.
I feel like some of those aren't followed by some of the people you may have mentioned. But anyway, carry on.
Hang on. I believe in the religion. I get to cherry pick what I follow.
Okay,
right?
all right. Yeah.
Don't you understand the basics of religion?
Yes.
The basics of religion is...
Everyone for themselves.
Yeah. The basics of religion is I can believe a whole bunch of crap, right? As long as it's good for me and bad for you, and that's the whole basis of religion.
I don't think
How do you work that out?
it doesn't have to be bad for you, but as long as it's good for me.
Right? Yes.
Yeah, the rest of it is
I
inconsequential.
can't believe you haven't worked this out yet.
Anyway, back
and
to
I get
the topic.
to choose what I follow. And by the way, I can follow something today, but not tomorrow.
Right.
Right? I can choose when to follow it and when not to follow it, depending on whether it's good or bad for me. That's the whole basis of religion. Do you not understand this? Anyway, that's what I was saying. So, based on something like the Islamic faith,
yes.
I can lend you money, but I shouldn't be asking for an interest in return. Right?
Yep.
So, they could quite easily make the claim that it's offensive that the National Australia Bank charges interest, or that the Commonwealth Bank charges interest. Oh, that bank isn't providing for me of my faith. I should be able to borrow that $1 million and pay it when I want to pay it and how I want to pay it.
So how does it work in Israel?
Well, I don't know. I genuinely, I think what they do is that there are certain like Islamic banks that that have been set up to lend money according to whatever laws they follow, religious laws.
The irony being, with our interest rates dropping the way they are, we may all be in the same situation where there's no interest to pay back.
Right, but I'm just saying, it's you could take the argument to the nth degree, right? Okay. You can really take the argument to the nth degree. At the end of the day, we live in a society of laws. I don't know whether it's the laws that are enacted by the society or whether the society is enacted itself and constructed by the laws. It doesn't matter. I'm making an academic point, right? But the laws exist, and they exist because of certain realities. We can't just go around and say, well, this I find offensive. Well, I'm sorry. You may find some things offensive according to whatever system of belief you have, but, I have the right to offend you. That is my right as a free person. That's the other thing that's worth discussing.
It's more like none of us have the right not to be offended. I think that's what some.
What I was going to say was, is it more about intentional offensiveness? So people frown against that to a certain extent.
But it doesn't matter. It doesn't fucking matter. It really doesn't matter whether I mean it. You see, because now you're heading down that rabbit hole where I need to prove intent, right?
But that's my question. I mean, there's a whole lot of changes that have happened in society. Hold on, particularly around whether it's LGBTQI, whatever, all the extra things for those, where that is actually the way things are now. You just shouldn't be an asshole to people because it doesn't matter to you.
Of course, I freaking well shouldn't be an asshole.
That's right. But what I'm saying is
I shouldn't be, and there's a lot of things I shouldn't be. Right? I shouldn't be. Of course, I shouldn't be an asshole.
Yeah.
Right? But the fact that I may be an asshole, or that some other person may be an asshole, you know what? That's their right to be an asshole. They've got every right to be an asshole.
And that's my question. Do we need to have things in there where we're protecting people who are...
No, we don't.
Hold on, I've got to get the question out first. People who are historically prejudiced against, if that's the right way of putting it, they're persecuted or put down. Do we just continue that sort of thing?
No, we don't. I don't want to persecute anyone.
Well, and I don't want to. But some people do.
No, but that's not a freedom. Hang on a second. We're talking about
verbally persecuting. So if you continue to talk if you continue to talk about people in a negative sort of way,
yes.
Where's the law? I mean,
there is no law. I should be allowed to do that.
Okay, all right.
I should be allowed to do that. And you know what? If I do that, there should be consequences.
Yeah, well, that's true.
That's the thing people don't understand about freedom of speech, right? And again, I know that a couple of weeks back we talked about Israel Folau, and right. This is what people don't understand about freedom of speech.
Yeah.
Freedom of speech doesn't mean that there are no consequences, right? There are consequences. But you should still be free to say what you want to say.
But you're also talking about the consequences to the person who has said it, the offensive thing, as opposed to the consequences for the person who, day after day, year after year, whatever it is, has to... Hold on, I've got to get it out first. Has been subjected to the sorts of things that keep them repressed or keep them where they are.
Absolutely, there are consequences to that person. And if I want to go and make a comment about that person, right? Let's say I can't even think of a good example. Let's say I want to go and verbally abuse a gay person, right? Now that person, and for anyone that's listening, I don't want to abuse anyone.
No,
okay?
This is all about pricking bubbles to make people think.
Don't jump in halfway through the conversation and think that I want to abuse gay people. I don't want to do that, right? But let's say that I was a gay hater and I wanted to go and hate on gays. I wanted to go and abuse people in the street or online, wherever I want to do. God, I've got so many better things to do with my time than do that, right? So let's say I wanted to do that, right? Well, okay, is it my freedom to do that? Yes, it is. Is there a consequence? Yeah, well, there's two consequences. One is a consequence I may suffer for doing that, right? And one consequence might be, I lose my Twitter account, right? Another consequence is going to be on the person that I'm abusing. They're going to feel bad about it. They're going to feel horrible about it, okay? Again, that depends on the person, because I may abuse a person and they may use that abuse in a very positive way, and it may bolster them up. It may give them power. I don't know. It all depends on the mental makeup of that person. But of course, there's going to be a consequence on everything that I say. But that doesn't mean that I shouldn't be allowed to say it. Of course I should be allowed to say it. I should be allowed to offend people, right? I absolutely should be.
I know there's
As an educated person, though, I don't want to do that.
No.
And this is where we are. This is where it's important as adults, as parents, as teachers, as good influences in society. I hate that word, by the way, influencer,
Yeah.
right? But as a good person, I want to influence my child, my community, to not offend anyone, or to be aware of what they're saying. I want to influence them by example, and I want to influence them by education, right? But I also want to say to that community, to say to my child, they have absolutely got the right to say every freaking thing they want to say, but it's not without consequence. It's this is it. There's consequences. I can't go to a major department store in Melbourne and yell out fire. Fire, fire, fire. Of course I can say that, but there's going to be a consequence to that, right? The consequences will be I'll probably be arrested, causing a public nuisance.
We're not really offending anyone by saying that. So but
I'm not. This is not a question of offence. It's a question of consequence, right? You're saying, do I have the right to offend someone? And I'm saying, yes, I do. I have the right to offend someone. No one has the right to not be offended. If you want to be offended, right? Because then you've got to look at the very, very slippery slope and very much the arguments that gets made. There's nothing that I can say at any point in time that at some point will not offend someone.
Yeah, and that's also something that I
Not
tend to agree with,
single
because
thing.
I think about what's happened in recent.
If I
recent
say that
politics.
gay people have the right to vote, that offends the Christian lobby.
Yeah.
If I say if I support the Christian lobby and I say gay people don't have the right to get married, that offends the gay people. If I say, if I say that people should be charged more tax, that offends people who have a lot of money.
Okay.
Let
me just
it's
interrupt.
going to offend everyone.
We'll just go back to the recent federal election here in Australia. We had back in, when was it, May?
Yep.
Leading into it, we had a lot of candidates who were had to withdraw or were disendorsed by their parties because of things that they'd said that were seen to be offensive, whether they were sexist jokes,
Right.
whether they were racist comments, or whether they were homophobic.
Yep.
And these people were disendorsed.
Right.
Now, I know we come down to you've said, well, they have the right to say those things.
Yes, absolutely they do.
And so they're then being suffering the consequences.
Yes.
But those things, quite often, for some of them, were 10 years ago and maybe even 15 years ago. The problem with social media is it's very unforgiving as far as time is concerned.
Right.
Things are still there. So how do you feel as far as people being made to, I'll say suffer, because if you're losing the endorsement, if you're losing your position, you are no longer able to pursue that particular
Right, so something
path.
historical.
Something historical. These people are being made to suffer for something. They may have changed their views. A lot of the times the people said, I was young and stupid, I made a mistake. I think back to things that I've said on the internet
Yes.
over time. And even my conversation, if anyone said, and I've said it now, if anyone said, oh, he once made a sexist comment saying about girly throws. Well, you know what? If that's all it takes to end a potential career, this person could be fantastic in their particular job, the area they're choosing, but they made an offensive comment that someone got upset about.
That's a great. What you're asking is a really great question.
Is there a time limit, or do we still have the right to be offended 10 years if we didn't hear it at the time? 10 years after someone made one comment,
Yes.
do we still have that right to
Oh,
be?
absolutely, you do.
So are the consequences then to be today's consequences, or is it, well, okay, he's had 10 years to change his view, or
I'm a very ecumenical person when it comes to the rights.
you hate everyone equally?
The rights of people,
Yeah.
right? The rights of people. As much as I believe that I have the right to be offensive or I have the right to offend anyone, I also believe that a person has the right to be offended. That's completely their right. And they have the right to be offended historically, 20 years ago, 100 years ago. Of course they do. But it's what's important here is not the fact that I have the right to say or the fact that I have the right to be offended. What's important is the act of consequence. This is what people really get wrong. It's the act of consequence and the act of remorse. What we do wrong as a society is we often don't allow someone to be remorseful for what they've said. People say things. There was that recent thing with Liam Neeson, who said that someone that he knew or one of his relatives was...
No, it was him. Yeah. Someone he knew had been
attacked by a black person.
Yeah.
And so he wanted, and I think he actually said
he went out looking for a black person
to beat up.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, that was horrible and offensive. But you know what? When you heard him later on, with perspective,
explaining himself,
he explained himself, and that doesn't make what he said any less offensive.
No.
But he, in my mind, in my estimation, he was showing genuine remorse, and he was clearly acting from the position of a very deranged mind at the time, right? And I think if I said that about him, he would agree with me, right? But he showed what I felt was genuine remorse. Now, people still have the right to be offended by it, but we also need to look at that in a very human way and say, well, he is showing some remorse here. So this is what I'm saying.
I think
it's not a question of being offended now or offended historically. It's more of a question of how do we measure, understand consequence? How do we measure and understand the fact that a person is being remorseful? Me being able to say something that offends someone, I should be allowed to do that, and there are consequences to doing that, and there are historical consequences. And people who value, if I said something against someone 10 years ago, but I'm doing really well now, and maybe I'm part of a political party, they need to look at that and say, well, what's the guy doing now? Is he doing well now? And if he's not doing well now, or he's still holding that belief, if that estimation is made, then maybe I do need to be turfed. In fact, I definitely need to be turfed if I still hold a stupid belief like that, right? Where I've offended someone. But if I'm doing really well now, I'm doing well for the party, I'm doing well for people, and I'm showing genuine remorse, and the political party still wants to turf me, well, you know what? That's fucking stupid. And people will do stupid things.
I think sometimes it almost feels like the remorse has to come before there's been enough time for anyone to actually have understood why they need some remorse. So, you can say something wrong. I keep going back to my girly thing. I was made to feel like I was part of the problem when I said something like that. Part of the problem, this is why women have issues and trouble and aren't treated well. That's, I was perpetuating, I hate saying it, rape culture. I was part of the problem. And rather than...
So that's why I started having problems. I can understand the feminist lobby having a perspective on what you said.
Oh, no, it's fine. No,
and I agree with that perspective.
Yeah, but there's no time.
But to be able to say, to make the leap, to be able to say, you, Mike the Llama, making that statement is the perpetuation of a rape culture. To me, like, that's a big wow. I sit there and think, wow.
Yeah, but again,
that's a leap.
But I also don't feel I'm in a position to necessarily comment on that.
Well, yeah.
One way or the other. But all I'm getting at, I guess, is that the conclusion has been made as to what the consequence is of me saying that, and it doesn't allow for you to go, oh, okay, all right, I get what you're saying. I am sorry. I'm not going to say it again. That should be the end of it. That should be the end of it, rather than, making this big accusation or the big claim that you are part of the problem.
Well, you're right. I mean, it should be the end of it. This is what I'm saying. I'm saying we should be, while free speech allows me to say what I want and to offend people, and while I need to recognise that there are consequences to that, they're in the same way, those people that are offended need to recognise that some people are maybe saying things that are not in their mind offensive. They may be saying things because they've been brought up in a certain way or are of a certain ilk that they need to be that they need to be re-educated,
But I also think there's ways to
and the people that are being offended need to look at someone or a particular person and say, well, maybe that person is being remorseful, and I need to value that.
That's right, but and that's what I was going to say. I think there's also an element of you need to accept that not everything that is said or done or presented or something that does offend you is meant that way, and so you need to treat people as individuals rather than the blanket. You're a shit. You've done a shit thing. I'm now going to tell you why you're shit. You can educate people without bagging them or making them suffer. And I think we're at the point now, and this is how it feels. Maybe I'm just being a sook. I don't know. Where when people are offended, they suddenly educate the hell out of you, and you have to just sit and cop it, even though you may, as you said, may be remorseful. You may have expressed that remorse, but some people feel the need to continually educate you and remind you that you were a little bit shit once, that you offended someone, even if it's a one-off. They're going to keep saying it. And that does not bring people along with you if you're trying to get change. And the change is is right. It is how we want. We want people to be nicer. We want people to be more respectful.
We live in a culture where everyone's offended by everything these days. And you've got to basically go around and you're walking on eggshells all the time. And let me tell you, the danger in all of this is that free speech will suffer. Right? If I am offended by pretty much everything, it's free speech that suffers the most. Right? It really is. It basically means that I can't express what I want to say. I can't say what I want.
I do feel, other than the fact that we have our own delightful podcast, I do feel a little bit that way, that with people I know, I can't say things the way I want because there are so many issues that are personal and precious to people. And that's fine. No one's arguing that sort of thing. But I feel like I can't say something because I'm I'll say educated, but I'm not as on board with what's the right thing to say. Well, it's my own ignorance rather than trying to be damaging or evil or wrong.
You'll know as soon as you're a parent of a teenager how bad you've been all your life.
Yeah,
because suddenly every turn of phrase that you use,
yes,
or any opinion you
I hate you
is so wrong.
Yeah, that's true. It is. We're all suddenly parents of teenagers when we don't quite know what is right and wrong.
Well, again, I get very upset at people getting offended, and there's so many people there that are professional offenders. Not professional offenders, but professional agitators who are offended by absolutely everything, and I just find that extremely frustrating.
They do serve a purpose again in that they're effectively alerting people to what's nice and what's not nice.
Yeah,
and
but
what's
not everything
polite.
is offensive.
No, that's
Mike.
true.
Not
That's true.
everything-
No, and you won't get any arguments from me. The way they present themselves and the way they blanket have a go at other people, I just find that ridiculous.
I'm offended by people not being rational. I'm offended by people not using facts and by people using the concepts within the realm of fantasy to rule their life and attempt to rule my life. I find those things absolutely offensive. I'm offended by people trying to silence my voice. And there are people. There are people within governments or people within companies for whom I work and everything that are always trying to silence my voice. That's what I find offensive. Again, if we take a position where we are not allowed to offend anyone, you will take a position where you can say nothing.
Yep, I would tend to agree with that.
And that is the bottom line, because you will always find something, no matter how innocuous it is, that will offend someone. And that's just the world we live in. I have the right to offend you, and you do not have the right to not be offended. That's
It in a nutshell.
That's the way I'd want to conclude this.
All right. Well, from this bald git, I'll say thank you again, Dr. Raven, for your insightful ramblings. And
thank you.
I'm not sure. I
don't know whether we've reached any point or any conclusion.
No.
But
just
what
be
I want,
nice. Just freaking be nice to people. Is
That's
probably,
right. It's exactly it, right? Yeah. Be nice to each other. Be nice to people. Try not, don't agitate people. Don't upset people. Hear people out. But if you are one of these people that's constantly offended, understand what that offence really means, and really try and understand that silencing the offence, silencing anyone, is silencing your own voice. The fact that you are offended is because of the freedoms that we have. Don't try and silence people, because what you will find is you will silence yourself.
Didn't we say in one of the other ones that the best way to find out who the maniacs are is to let them actually speak and reveal themselves? Maybe it's the same thing.
Absolutely.
You can avoid the main dickheads if they actually present themselves as dickheads. So, anyway, thank you again. We will see you on the next one.
See you next week, everyone. Like, comment, and subscribe.
Adios.